Good day and welcome inside Red Mile Rundown episode Jeff Reese. Yes, I'm going to try to find the obscure flames to match to the episode numbers. I think there'd be something fun to do. And Jeff Reese is who I came up with for today's episode. If you don't know who Jeff Reese is, go research it. He was here for a small time, not a long time. I am Johnny Soap, host of the Red Mile Rundown. And of course, alongside me, my co-host, Robert Munich. Robert, how are you today? And do you know Jeff Reese?
I've heard the name Jeff Reese. I'm not very familiar with his game. Was he a goalie?
He was a goalie. He was a pretty big backup. He did a lot of work in Toronto. He played Calgary for a little while. He was what you would call just below average.
Wonderful.
Net minding.
The Flames have had a lot of those goaltenders over the years.
Yes, he did. He was part of that wave just after the Mike Vernon type wave. He was in that little area there, and he was perfect for that era because he wasn't very good. Much like
they ripped through goalies during that era. Basically when Mike Vernon was gone, it seemed like they had like 3 or 4 goalies they used a year. Like that was wild.
It was very wild. How are things around your neck of the woods? How was Vancouver? Heard you were out there. You had a really good weekend and ready for the big week ahead. Standing up playoffs start on Wednesday. How excited are you for that? And how was your weekend?
Yeah, man. Weekend was great. I was hanging out with some friends and spent some time in Vancouver, which is super, super nice. And now I'm just excited to be on episode Joey McDonald with you today.
Ooh, nice pull.
That's the only 35 I could think of.
There's a couple more I can think of, but then you're just getting into like guys that are here for like a cup of coffee, like Vesa Toskala type people.
Oh, okay, that's a good one. That's a good pull.
Yeah, so, didn't Jamie McLennan wear 35 as well?
I think he was 29.
29. That's 29. That's right.
Yeah.
He wore 35 somewhere. I know he did. I'll fact check myself later on that. Before we derail ourselves completely, Red Mile Rundown, we are excited to do a Calgary Flames offseason preview episode today. Yes, the Flames started their offseason weeks ago while they missed the playoffs by a single tiebreaker. We decided we're just going to chit-chat a little bit about what we're seeing this offseason, kind of moves that we're looking for, what we would do, what Conroy would do. But first, Robert, let's get into where the Flames are contract-wise and roster-wise as it stands right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like you take a look at the contracts that are signed into next season, and then you could also throw in a couple that we know are going to get re-signed as well. And if you look at the Flames roster, like we'll start with the forwards. I mean, they pretty much have 13 forwards for next season already. So, you take a look at the depth chart, and it's Huberdeau, Kadri, Coronado, Sharangovich, Backlund, Coleman, Farabee, Frost, and I do think they'll re-sign Frost, Zary. I think they'll re-sign Kirkland, so he's in the mix. Lomberg, Pospisil, and Klapka. So, that's kind of the forward group that you're going into the summer with right now. And like I said, there's 13 of them there. So there's really not too many spots open for younger players or even, if they want to sign a free agent or make a trade. The roster is pretty full up front. So, I mean, I guess we'll kind of start there. So the first key this offseason is they're going to have to re-sign their RFAs and maybe a guy like Justin Kirkland. So maybe we'll just kind of like throw it around like for Frost, for Zary, for Klapka, and we'll throw Kirkland in there too. Like what sort of contract do you think these guys are going to get here?
That's a good question. It's really hard to ballpark numbers with some of these guys because you're not sure what they are. You got the injuries with Zary. What really is Connor Zary? Morgan Frost, you got to take in consideration the move from Philadelphia to Calgary. Klapka, I don't want to say flash in the pan, but that's all we've seen. It's just a small sample size. I think what we're looking at here, Robert, is an offseason of bridge contracts of let's take small flyers on some of these guys to know what we're actually up against with these players. A guy like Connor Zary, we all love Connor Zary as a fan base. We think there's something there with this guy. On your video games, you're probably signing Connor Zary to the 8-year contract option, giving him the full no trade move because you really love the player. But when you break it down into reality, Morgan Frost, Connor Zary, they played only a portion of a season with Calgary this year, and they showed well at times. At times, they've also struggled. So to really get a contract with some of these guys, it's hard to really pin it down. But I think we're looking at a summer where it's going to be a lot of bridge contracts, a lot of like 2 or 3 year deals, just to see what they've got in these guys and help bridge them over from the older guys to these new prospects that might be coming up in the Flame system here.
Yeah, I mean, I see it the same way. I think pretty much all those guys are going to get 1 or 2 year deals. I look at Connor Zary. I see kind of like a similar deal to what Tyson Forrester just signed in Philly. So that 2 years around 3.5, 3.75. Frost will probably be around the same. Klapka, I gotta think Klapka's going to come in pretty inexpensive. They could probably do one or 2 years around like $1 million, 1.5 range. And then Kirkland, we were talking about that on the last podcast. I think we were both in favor of bringing him back maybe on like a 1-year deal, but he's certainly not penned in on that roster yet.
Yeah.
So, they sign all those players, they bring all those guys back, and like I said, there's 13 of them, and that's not even including your Rory Cairns of the world, your Adar Sunievs, your William Stromgrens, guys that you hope maybe take a bit of a step in training camp and maybe push for a spot. So like I'm curious to get your thoughts. Like, would you consider moving any of these guys? Would you consider trying to trade them either for draft picks or because like I'm just looking at the roster here. It's crowded, man. For a team that wants to take another step next year, it's a crowded group, and it's pretty much all the same guys that they had at the end of the season.
I think you have to be open to moving these guys. You have to be open to moving pretty much anybody on this roster. If you're looking to get yourself better and push your roster ahead to the next step to be a playoff team, there shouldn't be very many, if any, untouchables amongst that forward group. Maybe Matt Coronado falls in that category of untouchable for the Flames, but you have to be able to look at your roster objectively and be like, listen, this was a good forward group. They got a bit of luck last year. We had some guys have some really good seasons. How likely is it Kadri is going to replicate his season? How likely is it Blake Coleman's going to get back to close to 30 goals where he was? What is Sharon Govich long-term? What is Farabee long-term? So you have to be open to moving these guys. And I think that's really one of the only ways you're going to upgrade this forward group is to make a trade. We'll get into this a bit later in the episode, but you look at that free agent pool and you sort by the UFAs, and that list does not inspire confidence by any stretch of the imagination that these are guys that are going to game break, that these are guys that are going to be the difference in your roster to get you over the top, unless you're talking about Marner, maybe Sam Bennett. These aren't guys that are going to make a huge difference on your roster. So the Flames, in order to get better with this forward group, in my opinion, they have to be open to moving pretty much anybody and everybody, if the deal makes sense, of course, and if it helps your roster, and sticks with, and obviously you want to stick with your plan, right? You have that plan of the age group that Conroy wants to be at to help build this roster. It's got to be all within those different criterias, but it makes sense to be open to trading pretty much everybody here.
Yeah, I think they got to at least be on the table, like you said, in the right deal. And I think if they're going to improve this forward group, they should probably make a trade, and it should be for a guy who's in that 21 to 23 range. And, a couple of them are on the market. I mean, you take a look at like JJ Peterka, you take a look at Marco Rossi, those would be the types of guys I think the Flames would have interest in. I think we know this summer, they're not going to make a trade for a veteran player. They're not going to make a big free agent signing for a guy who's 29, plus years old. I just don't think that's going to happen. So the way they're going to improve is through trade. And, I would be pretty open to them moving some assets out for a guy like Marco Rossi. I think that would make sense. Same thing with JJ Peterka. And the only thing with those types of deals is you'd probably have to throw in, a guy like a Connor Zary into the mix. You'd probably have to throw in a first round pick from this year's draft. Like, do you think making a deal like that makes sense for the team? Because I do. If you could throw like Zary and let's say Florida's first round pick for Marco Rossi, I think Rossi's an upgrade on Zary. I think he's a better player. I think he's more skilled. Like, that's the type of move I could see this team doing, because it would open up a roster spot, number one, and then also give you that. I think Rossi could be a legit second line center for this team for a long time. Like, I think a move like that would make a lot of sense.
I promise the listeners that I do not text Robert my notes, or he doesn't text me his notes, because that's the exact name at the top of my list of targets I have this offseason of guys I'd love to see the Flames make a move for. You take your love of Connor Zary out of the equation, because if that was how it would work, I would never trade Connor Zary. But if it's going to upgrade your roster like a Marco Rossi would, I absolutely look at that move. You run into a situation when you collect assets, and I'm going to anger Team Tank here for a minute, but when you just collect assets, you run into a situation like they have in Utah right now, where they have too many guys and nowhere to put these guys. You have too many prospects coming, and you have no idea where to put them, what to do with them. How do you develop all these guys? So at a certain point, you've got to use 2 or 3 assets and move them out the door rather than just keep collecting all these assets. You kind of want to do an in and out type of game as you're trying to build a roster here. So collecting assets is great, but then you also need to use those assets to help improve your roster. And this is a good off season for that. The cap is going up, yes, and so I don't think we're going to get this offer sheet summer like people like Frank Saravelli are saying we're going to get, because people are just going to match those contracts. But these trades, I think, is where we're going to find the movement around the National Hockey League, and Calgary could be right in the mix there with the big salary cap that they have going on. Guys like Marco Rossi, who are RFAs, who need contracts. Those type of deals make sense for Calgary because it helps keep them in that age range, but helps increase the roster, upgrade the roster, and put them in the next step that they want to be. They want to be a playoff team. Let's make no bones about what the Calgary Flames want to be next year. Conroy is not going to tank. Dustin Wolf's not going to let this team tank. Nazem Kadri is going to not let this team tank. There's just too much in that room that's not going to allow them to be a bottom 3 team. It's just not going to happen. So let's make the peace with it, and let's just decide what this team's going to be. So upgrade that roster to be a playoff team. A guy like Marco Rossi makes sense for me. I like the JJ Paterka name. Maverick Bork's another one that I have on my list of guys who would be interested in that mix of helping to build your roster and progressing yourself forward here.
You know, one name I find super interesting, like I wrote about this with Flames Nation last week, Elias Pettersson.
You love this one.
I think it's just such an interesting conversation because what have the Calgary Flames, what have they needed since they traded Joe Nieuwendyk in 1995? They needed a legit number 1 center. And those types of guys don't come on the market. They never come on the market. The only time they ever do come on the market, if it's a Jack Eichel situation where, you know, he's got like some sort of weird neck injury and he needs surgery that no one's ever got before. This Elias Pettersson thing is the exact same situation. He's kind of damaged goods right now. And, you know, he's been playing through injuries the last couple years, and his play has really taken a step back. But man, when this guy is on his game and he's confident, I legitimately think he's like a top 10 center in the National Hockey League. And I don't know, like if you're Craig Conroy, like, and you're the Calgary Flames, you're not drafting a number 1 center. Like it's just not going to happen unless you get insanely lucky, whether that's through winning a lottery or, you know, you end up picking a number 1 center like 14th overall within the next year or two. You know, they're just not going to get one. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think of the idea of Elias Pettersson? Like, I'm not sold on it by any means. I just think it's a really interesting discussion.
I think to have that discussion, you got to ask yourself a couple of different things here. What do you think you can get from Elias Pettersson if you brought him in? Do you think that you have the players around him to elevate him and to help him go? Because when he goes cold and brings nothing to the table. So you got to make sure that you have the right guys around him. Does he fit the culture they spent this entire last year and a half under Conroy trying to build here? Does he fit in that room? Does he answer the question of a number 1 center? Absolutely he does. He has all the skill in the world. And if you have a high confidence player, he's going to be remarkable to watch. But if you can fit that room, and then if you're willing to part with the assets that the Canucks are going to ask of the Flames to bring him in, then absolutely. And then you just got to make sure that you can swallow that contract as well. I would not mind it. I'm not going to pound the drum that I should lead the fan club and bring Pettersson into Calgary. But if they made that move, it's definitely something that upgrades that roster and it fills a couple of holes. Just make sure that when you do those type of moves, he's got to fit the other parts of that equation as well. There's nothing, you've saw it with Mikko Rantanen this year. The Carolina Hurricanes, they went out, made a huge splash, brought in a big time player, and it just didn't work for them. And they had to flip him out of there in a hurry. And we know the rest of the story there. So you just got to make sure that when you make these moves, that this player fit. And I think with what we have in Calgary, a guy like a Blake Coleman and Nazem Kadri, I wonder if Elias Pettersson can just slide in here. He doesn't have to be the cornerstone front guy, the guy that speaks to the media every day, because you got guys here that do that job. He might fit well in Calgary. That's a very interesting name. I know you love that one. And there was a really good article you wrote on that on flamesnation.ca as well. That's a very interesting name.
I think so too. Like, so, you know, I like run the Canucks Army social media, so I'm like dialed in with Canucks, and I pretty much watched, I think, like 75 Canucks games this year, and man, he had a really bad year. But when, like I said, when he's healthy and this offseason, like it sounds like he's going into the offseason with no injuries, so he's actually going to be able to have a full offseason of training. which I think would be massive for him because I know he went into Canucks camp last year out of shape, and that's where the whole JT Miller, Elias Pettersson drama started because Miller was so mad at him for coming in out of shape. But I think a lot of that had to do with an injury, like he wasn't able to train like he normally would. So, like, if you were to come to a place like Calgary where the pressure is significantly less, I know it's a Canadian market, but like, I think you would agree with me. Calgary is an easy market to play in if you're a player.
Compared to Vancouver and Toronto, absolutely.
Like, it's night and day. It's not even close. Like, at least in Calgary, like, of course you're going to be recognized like pretty much everywhere you go. But like, my understanding is like a lot of these players, whenever they're out in public, it's pretty much nothing but like super positive interactions with the fans. Like the Flames fan base is incredibly respectful. They're incredibly appreciative. And I don't think they're very difficult on the players. Like, I know, like, you know, Huberdeau, you know, the fans and, you know, guys like us included, we were all over him in the first 2 years. But I mean, he also had the biggest point drop off in the history of the NHL. So there's a reason why that we were hard on him. But, you know, now take a look at Huberdeau. He has a 62-point season, still nowhere close to being good enough, and fans love him. I think they're back on the Huberdeau bandwagon.
I think to that point, Robert, I think when it comes to Calgary fan base, it's online or talking in your groups that you're like, this guy sucks. This guy needs more from this guy. But then when you see that player in public, you see people like trying to like encourage that player. Hey, stick with it, man. Let's keep going. Like, so people are like, they can be hard on the players here, but at the same time, when you see those players in public, it's more of encouragement of that player. And I think players really appreciative of that. The guys like Jerome McGinn that really, really say things like they love the community for that reason. They're never really like on you in person. It's they have their opinions, and when they talk in their groups and their friends, it's all that they talk the hockey side of it. When you see them in public, the person side comes out of it. And I think that's really unique and really special to the Calgary fan base.
I totally agree. And it's different than in Vancouver, Toronto, even Edmonton now. Like, a lot of those guys go out in public and not everybody is respectful towards them. Like, I mean,
100%.
You know, we've seen those videos with like, even with McDavid, when he's out with his family at a restaurant, people are like, you know, trolling him. It's like, that stuff's terrible. Like, that stuff doesn't really happen in Calgary. So, and then even when you take a look at the media is not overly critical. I think a lot of the guys who are there, like boots on the ground every day, are just there to tell stories and, you know, to get the players' stories out there. I don't really think there's a lot of like critical analysis and breakdown of their games like you'd see in other Canadian markets. So, you know, like with all that being said, I think that the Calgary market, Calgary fans, Calgary media would actually be a good place for Pettersson to come because he does not really like the spotlight. He is a bit of a sensitive guy. And, you know, coming to a place like Calgary where, like you said, they already have Kadri, Backlund, Coleman, Huberdeau, Weegar, you know, Anderson for now, Lomberg. They got lots of leaders in that room that could take him under their wing. And, you know, like you said, he could be on the ice. He'd need to be the guy, of course. But then off the ice, he could just kind of like, you know, hang around in the background. Like, he wouldn't be looked at as like one of like the core leaders for at least like a few seasons. Like, I think you'd want him to take that step if you were to come to Calgary eventually. Yeah. But for like the first few years, like he could really just kind of settle in and just kind of, you know, I wouldn't say kick his feet up, but from like a media perspective and like a camera facing perspective, he totally could. So, you know, I think the idea is fascinating because like we've said, we're not going to find number one center through the draft. You're not going to find it in free agency. You're going to have to find it pretty much either in the top 5 of the draft, which this team doesn't look like they're going to be there anytime soon, or you're gonna have to make a trade for one. And, you know, the odd time, you know, your Tyler Seguin in 2013 becomes available, your Jack Eichel becomes available, you know, Ryan O'Reilly with Buffalo. This is one of those times where one of these guys is available. Like the Canucks are fed up with him. Like I know for a fact that the Canucks are not happy with how things have gone the last couple of years. So there's an opportunity there, man, to maybe make a really bold move and bring in a guy that could be a, you know, your 80 to 100 point Selke nominated type of number one center. Like when Pettersson's on his game, he's that good. Like I've heard players on the Canucks compare him to Pavel Datsyuk before.
That's
like
crazy.
That's like his teammates. Those are like NHL players, guys on the ice with him, comparing him to a guy like that. So, you know, if I'm Conroy, I'm at least inquiring.
Absolutely.
Like, I think you have to. I think Craig Conroy wouldn't be doing his job. So I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, what would you give up for a guy like Pettersson? Like, what do you think is a realistic trade package? You think?
Oh man, well, The Canucks are putting themselves in a spot if they're trading Pettersson. Are they then going to go down the terms of a rebuild? Because then you're probably talking about, well, who's the top prospect? Are you willing to give up a guy like a Gridden plus a first-round draft pick plus more? Is it going to be a guy off your roster that they really, really like? A guy like a Connor Zary, maybe even a Matt Coronado might be someone that has to go back the other way. It's going to be high-profile guys that have to go back for a guy, but it's the price you pay to bring in the number one center. If you're going to go down this path of looking at being that team that acquires the number one center, you've got to give up something big in return. That's just how it's going to happen. Being a divisional rival and being so close in proximity, does that up the cost in a deal like this? It possibly could be, because you look at how the Flames, when they traded Elias Lindholm the other direction, he got an absolute haul from Vancouver for him. Now you flip the script the other direction. What are you going to want for Pettersson? That's a big conversation. But I think those are the prices that you're willing to pay to a point. Like, you got to be willing to give up a good roster player, a prospect, and a first-round draft pick for a player like that, knowing what you're getting in return. And that fills a big hole, which has been a big hole since 1995 on this roster. Then you fill that hole and you make that move, you make that contract. Obviously, if they're wanting, Parekh, 2 firsts, Connor Zary, and 3 other guys, you got to kind of say, well, no, let's be more realistic here. But you've got to look at it, and you got to be willing to pay that high cost. And it's going to be a high cost, but I think I'd be willing to pay it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is that, he does have a big contract. Like, he makes $11.6 million a year, I think, for the next 7 years.
He's got term as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the Flames are doing a favor by taking on the contract.
True.
So, I kind of like your idea. Like, you start the package with Zary because they probably need a center to replace him. And then you throw in, a first round pick or 2, maybe even both in this year's draft, and then maybe a prospect on top of it. And then that way, Vancouver, they clear a bunch of cap space, and then they can use those assets to go out and find another really good forward to replace him potentially. So, like, there's a deal to be had there for sure. A ton of risk, an insane amount of risk in a deal like that. But man, I think it's super, super interesting.
But the bold seem to get paid off, though. Those that are bold enough to make those, like Jack Eichel, was a big reason why the Vegas Golden Knights got over the hump and won a Stanley Cup. Okay, Dallas got to the West Conference Final this year with Rico Manton. After they went out and we were bold about that trade. So these trades that are bold, Matthew Tkachuk helped the Panthers go to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals now. Bold teams seem to have it pay off for them. It might not be right away, it may not be immediate, but they get paid off. And teams that are bold reap the rewards of being that team, being that bold team. And the Flames have always been that mediocrity team, that team that always goes out and drafts the Jankowskis and makes the safe trade for Matt Stage and over Dion Phaneuf. Those type of things aren't going to get you over the hump. Those are just deck chairs on the surface. You want to be bold. You want to take the next step, and you're not going to be able to draft in the top 3. Go out and be bold and make a trade like this.
Yeah. It's super interesting, man. Yeah, and we don't know if Pettersson's the guy, but these types of players, they do not hit the market very often. Like I think I just listed 4 in the last 12 years. Yeah. So, yeah, if you want a player like that, I think, like you said, you got to be aggressive and you got to be willing to take a big swing. And my God, that would be a big swing.
And if it doesn't work, you just saw Carolina. They took with the Mikko Rantanen thing. They didn't work. Flip them around. They got a great player in Stan Coven. They got a couple of first-round draft picks coming towards that they can use and play around with at the draft. So what if they go and they get themselves another player using those first-round draft picks? Like, there's always ways to do it. But if you're not bold in the first place, well, then you're just kind of going through the motions here, in my opinion.
Yeah. The only issue with Pettersson, though, is just the term, like the contract. And then he has a full no move kicking in July. So he would kind of control the process. So like a little different from Rantanen, but like I get what you're saying. Like other teams would be willing to take a chance on this guy too, I think.
100%.
And
if it's not working, I'm sure Pettersson would also be open to a move as well.
Yeah. I talked about Joel Farabee the other day on Twitter. Where do you see Joel Farabee fitting in on this team?
Which Joel Farabee are we getting?
Well, exactly. I don't know. That's the problem, is we have no idea which one is going to come to town next year.
When you listed off those forwards at the top, I was going through the lines that you have written down. You go through the last year's end of the season lines. The more we talk about players like Azari or like Klapka or like Morgan Frost, the further down the line Farabee goes for me. And I currently have him slotted in a fourth line role. But that's not Joel Farabee. He should be a top 6 player. There's no reason why he can't be a second line winger who's scoring goals, because that's what he's shown in the past that he can be. So what Joel Farabee are we going to get here? Because right now, for me, a fourth line player, and I'd rather spend my $5 million elsewhere if that's where he's going to be as a player. But then you're not going to get rid of that $5 million without giving up a big cost to get rid of that player. So I don't know about Joel Farabee, but we need him to have a big offseason, a massive camp, and to show us what this player is, because I really don't know.
I don't either. And like you look at the forward group, like he'll be competing with Sharangovich, Zary, Pospisil, Klapka. Like he'll be in that kind of group of players. And if he doesn't get to the top of that group, he's going to be a bottom 6 forward. And like you said, he might even end up on the fourth line.
Because he's got to be careful as well. He's got Hanzik behind him. A lot of people are high on Gridden, what he's brought behind him. What's Stromgren going to be? Does Karen's become a winger in the NHL level? Like, he's got to be careful, because behind him, those kids are pressing really, really hard, and they're coming quicker than some people might think they are. I could really see a guy like Gridden actually have a really good camp and do what Sam Hanzik did last year, surprise a lot of people, steal a roster spot, start the season in Calgary. If he has himself a good enough camp, he's right there. Why not? Because all you got to do is show you're better than Joel Farabee and you're on the roster here.
Yeah, like I almost just feel like he's redundant at this point. Like I know like a lot of people are pushing back. Like I put out the idea of buying him out because
I saw that.
Because he's 25 years old. The buyout is like extremely reasonable. Like they pretty much like can buy him out for free almost. And yeah, a lot of people are pushing back saying like, oh, like he's gonna bounce back, like he's gonna be this really good player. But you know, I just mentioned the forward group here. There's a lot of guys like him already.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys below him in the lineup make a lot less money and have a lot less term. And like you said, there's prospects coming up. Like I expect, maybe not necessarily this season, but the following 2 seasons while Farabee's under contract, I expect the Sunievs, Stromgrens, Karens, Griddens of the world, maybe even Basha. I expect those guys to really push for roster spots. And quite honestly, in those years, I'd rather see those types of players get a roster spot over a guy like Joel Farabee, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm really with you there. If Farabee can come out here and show that he is a second line winger that can score points, like we've seen it in the past, he's gotten 50 points before with Philadelphia a couple seasons ago. He's scored himself 22 goals and 20 goals in this league. He has that COVID season of 38 points in 55 games. Like he's done it. He's done it in this league. The problem is he's so inconsistent with it, and you don't know what you're going to get from year over year that you overlook him a lot. And these people online that are saying, "Oh, he's going to be a bounce back player," is he?
Yeah,
because he went from 39 points to 50 points down to 19 points. Like he hasn't shown as a bounce back guy. He hasn't shown a consistent player. So the buyout of what was it, $1 million something over a couple of seasons? Like it's not a big cost to buy this guy out in cap wise with your cap going up. The buyout process, I think it's legitimate there for a couple players on the Flames roster. And I think he headlines that list of players that potentially could get bought out. And I could definitely see it happening. But this player that people think we got in Farabee, he's a fine player if he shows up and shows it. We just haven't seen it.
For sure. And the whole idea of the buyout isn't necessarily like for this season. Like honestly, for like this upcoming year, like he could totally fit in on the roster.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the next 2 years after that when he's making $5 million. And I think that's when Conroy's really going to want to start taking some swings. He's going to want to start to bring in some players, and you're going to need cap space to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you're already paying Huberdeau $10.5 million to be a kind of a second line forward. You're paying Sharangovich just under $6 million. And who the hell knows what he's going to be. And then all of a sudden you have Farabee on top of that. Like you're looking at a little over $21 million tied up in these 3 wingers who, you know, aren't providing that much compared to, you know, what they're making right now. So I don't know. Like, I think it makes sense, dude. I think it really makes sense just to at least like seriously consider doing it.
Yeah, because you got Martin Pospisil that's going to need a deal as well in that age group. Do you bring back Lomberg, who's part of those wingers there? And then you got all those kids that we keep naming. And so there's a lot of competition for a few spots. And what do you do here? So it's a big offseason for Farabee, isn't it? Like, it's
Massive.
huge. And what do you do with this guy? Like, if he starts next season on an absolute tear, well, then you have your answer. But if he comes into the season and he's up and down and all around, I just don't know what you do with this guy. I really don't.
Yeah. And I don't think he's got much trade value just because of his contract and the season he's coming off of. Like, I can't imagine that there would be a team out there that'd be willing to take him on.
I think you get very similar to what Flames did, right? Flames traded a couple of players and a pick and got themselves Morgan Frost, and this Farabee just happened to be part of the deal.
Yeah, he was essentially a cap dump for Philly.
100%. He made the cap work, and I think that's how you use him if you trade him out. He's just going to be one of those guys added to the end of a deal here to make the cap work, i.e. a trade to Vancouver. Maybe Farabee's thrown at the end of that deal to make the cap work a little bit. Who knows? Like, but that's where he is, and that's unfortunate because he's got skill. We've seen the skill. And he's got it. He just doesn't use it for me. He's a frustrating player. He fits that Sharon Govich mold for me as well. Like a player that has something there and has shown those flashes, can score these goals, can put himself in a spot to be successful. He's just not consistent in doing so.
Yeah, and like I saw some people saying like, oh, he'd be a great fit with Backlund and Coleman. I'm like, what do you like?
We saw that.
We saw like that a little bit this year, and I didn't think he was very good on that line. Like, I don't think he's like a great defensive player. You know, he's not like much of a penalty killer. I don't really know what he provides if he's not putting up 50 points, and that's asking a lot of him because he's only done that really once in his career. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's going to be fascinating to see how that all plays out. I think it's going to be really interesting. Just that whole deal in general to see if Frost can step up next year, if Farabee can step up. I mean, if they're on the roster next year and they're playing to that kind of 40, 50 point potential, that's a bit of a game changer for the Flames. To add that type of offense.
100%. You need that offense too, because that's one thing that we've said for years on the Calgary Flames is they have trouble scoring, and how many players can elevate their game to give those teams the points. Well, Farabee's one of those guys. If he can elevate his game and get back to the 45, 50 point mark, you know, that's huge for not only him, but for the Flames as well, because are we really expecting Nazem Kadri to have a career year in points again? Are we really expecting Sharon Govich to be 30 goal scorer every year? Are we really expecting Huberdeau, as the older he gets, to continue to produce at the level that he came to know this last season? What do you get out of Coleman? So a 50-point Farabee would be an absolute godsend for the Flames. I just don't see us getting it based on what we've seen from Farabee so far in a Flames uniform. As far as him with Backlund and Coleman, I vehemently disagree with that because we saw it and it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I am with you. Are there any other aspects of the forward group you want to touch on? Or do you want to start talking about the defense?
Well, the other thing with forwards is what do you do with all of those aging guys? Like, you got those guys. Do you move out one of your aging veterans to make room for someone behind them? It's going to take a kid pressing from the back end like Hanzik to push a guy out of a job here. But it'd be interesting to watch how the Flames handle their veterans on the forward group, especially with guys like Backlund coming up on expiring deals as well. That's all I had.
Yeah. I would seriously consider like looking to move them in a trade if you're bringing in a younger guy. Like, you know, say if you could include Blake Coleman in like a Marco Rossi deal or a JJ Peterka deal, I think I would definitely consider that. But to move one of those guys out right now for draft picks, I don't know if this is the season for it. I would definitely say for the following year, the 2026-27 season, I would say that's when you should maybe start to look out these guys because now they're really starting to get up there in age and their contracts are a little bit more palatable. But you know, for this season, like if their goal is to make the playoffs and be competitive, like they can't really move the veteran players right now. If you're looking at it from just an asset management perspective, 100% it makes sense to move those guys out. And if they wanted to tank, obviously you'd want to move pretty much all of them out. But they're not looking to do that, right? And there's not even like a point in having that discussion because we just know it's not going to happen.
The only one that I would move out for a draft pick is if Michael Backlund went to the Flames and asked, "Hey, I want to go chase a cup," and the season wasn't going so hot for anybody. That's the one I could see just being moved up for draft picks. But I'm with you there. Like they're not going to tank. So sorry, team tank. It's not going to happen unless there's a big injury across the board to a couple players. Heaven forbid. It's just not going to happen. So why not try to make the playoffs here? And you do that with your veteran guys leading the way. You just need your perimeter guys, your Farabees, your Sharon Goviches, your Zaris to just give a little bit more, provide a little bit more, take the next step in their progression and help this team push forward here a little bit.
Yeah. And then on defense, man, The defense, I think, is the most fascinating part of this team because, if they end up trading Rasmus Anderson, the group is kind of a mess. Like as currently constructed. Like, so say they do trade Rasmus Anderson and they don't bring back a top 4 defenseman. Currently, the group is looking like something along the lines of Kevin Ball, Mackenzie Weegar, Jake Bean, Zane Parekh, Ilya Solovyov, Braden Pahal, and Daniil Miramanov. And then you'll have, your Yan Kuznetsov and Hunter Brustevich's pushing, hopefully, in training camp. Like that.
Weegar and the boys.
That is a terrible group of defensemen right now. Outside of Weegar and Ball, like, you have a 19-year-old in Parekh as a rookie. Like, you want him probably on the third pair playing, 60 to 70 games. And then you got, Bean. We all know Bean struggles. Pahal is like a true number 6, number 7. Solovyov, we don't know. Kuznetsov, we don't know. Miramanov is junk. Like,
don't stop saying his name.
It's almost like Voldemort in Harry Potter.
It is.
You don't say his name.
But that's a good point by you. Like, you just list off a bunch of nice guys, super fun guys, good in the room guys, but on ice, that's a scary, scary thought. And all due respect to guys like Zane Parekh, he's going to have his warts. He's going to have his turnovers and his issues on ice. It's just going to happen how he grows. 19-year-old Solovyov has shown flashes, but how good really is he long-term? What is Kuznetsov at the NHL level? Pahal is who Pahal is, but can he elevate a little bit more? You have the guy with the M name. Does he actually factor into the Flames this year? Did we move on from him? Like, there's a lot of questions on the back end for the Flames here. It's going to be fascinating. And this, I think, is where the Flames are going to have to make their most hay. Everyone's focused on center, and everyone's focused on these great prospect defensemen coming up. I think we're overlooking the fact that the NHL defense, if Anderson's not back, is actually pretty awful.
If they go into next season with this defense, like, they're guaranteed to miss the playoffs. And I still don't think they'll necessarily be like bottom 5, but they will not be a good team.
They'll pick right in that 15th, 16th, 15th spot, somewhere in there.
It's what it feels like. And so, like, if on the Flames, like you said, like, a lot of the talk has been about center ice. I think the number one need for this team are young top 4 defensemen. Like, if they can go out and get a Bowen Byram or like a Keandre Miller type of player, that's something that I would be super interested in if I were the Flames, because, like, especially on the left side, because if you can go, Bowen Byram, Mackenzie Weegar is like a top pair as an example, and then you have Kevin Ball in the second pair with, if Rasmus Anderson's still there, or maybe you go out and just sign a veteran free agent for a couple years for big money. Like, I think that would make all the difference in the world, because with the group as currently constructed, it's looking a little rough. And, like, for Zane Parekh, I think the expectations are getting a little out of control for this guy for next year. Like,
yes, we need to calm down.
For sure. And, like, you take a look at young defensemen, like, it usually takes them like 2 or 3 years in the NHL to really kind of find their footing. So heading into next year, my expectations for Parekh are like pretty low. I'm like, if he can play on the third pair right side, play 60 to 70 games, quarterback the second power play unit, and, maybe if he plays really well, maybe he can even quarterback the number 1 unit in the second half of the year or something. But put up, I'd say like over 82 games, like a 30-point pace, something like that. Like, I think that would be a very successful first year in the NHL for Parekh, because I'm seeing other people like saying like he should play in the top 4 and, like, play every game and he's going to be a 40 to 50 point guy. I'm like, like, let's pump the brakes a little bit here. Like, he's only 19 years old.
I'm going to say RIP to my Twitter mentions right now, because Zane Parekh, it would be a mistake to play him in your top 4. It absolutely would. This is a young defenseman who is very raw. And yes, he's made leaps and bounds in his defensive game, but that's OHL. Like, let's remember what we're talking about here, which is great for him. He needed to make those leaps and bounds defensively, and he has to this point. This is why I really wish that he could go to the AHL this season. He should play third pair. Like there's nothing wrong with him playing 60 to 70 games, not all 82. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with him playing a sheltered 15 minutes a night, learning the game, learning how to be a pro, learning how to be a power play quarterback at the NHL level. People need to remember what we're asking a 19-year-old kid to do on the back end. It's not an easy thing to do. We saw guys who have bigger pedigrees come in, and they have struggled in their first season in the National Hockey League. Like not every year are you going to see a Hudson come into the league and take the Montreal Canadiens into the playoffs. It just doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen a lot. And it takes a very special player to do so. So putting Parekh any higher than a third pair, second power play, for me this year is a mistake. Let him learn, let him grow, let him progress, because I really wish he could be in the AHL. Playing all the minutes in the AHL would have been perfect for Zane Parekh in his development this year. It's just not an option. OHL is too poor for him now. He's too good for that league. Let him play, but don't overwhelm him. And that would be a huge mistake for the Flames. So when you're talking about this back end, for me, I automatically put him in that third pair, whether that's with a Solovyov beside him, or you go re-sign Joe Hanley, whoever it is beside him. That's where I think we should put him. And you go out and find a way to fill your top four, whether that's keeping Rasmus Andersson till closer to the deadline, which I think would be a mistake, or trading Rasmus Andersson for another veteran. Maybe Rasmus Andersson to New York for a Keandre Miller type swap can be made and worked in the works there. Do you go out and offer sheet Nicholas Hague, which is a name I have on my list? Do you go find Byron Bowenbauer, or do you do 2 or 3 of those moves and bring in a couple of guys to help solidify this defensive group? Playing Zane Parekh top 4, though, is absolutely not the answer for me.
Yeah, at least to start the year. Like, I mean, maybe it's a Dustin Wolf situation where, you know, you kind of shelter him a little bit, and if he really starts to excel, then 100%. You can throw him in the top 4. Like, that's totally fine. But to start the year and
that
to have
the expectation,
no, I don't think it can. Like, it's too much on him. And you take a look at like someone like the young puck moving defensemen around the NHL that, like, you know, your Cale Makars, Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, like those types of players. They didn't really like totally break out until they were like 21, 22 years old, and Zane Parech's 19. So. Yeah, just I'd say we should pump the brakes on the expectations for him. Like top 4 Parekh to start the year. I think it's putting way too much pressure on him. And you know, like you're seeing people already talk about how he's going to be like the next franchise defenseman and all that. I'm like yes, the potential is there for sure. Obviously, the skill is just phenomenal. But like, let's pump the brakes and give him some time to get there, and not just put the expectations on him like right away. Like, I think we just got to be super, super patient with this guy.
Yeah, be excited for this player, because I am. Be very excited for what he could potentially be down the road. Absolutely. But you got to let him get there. You cannot rush progression. It doesn't happen. Look what, like, you look around the league, look what Dion Phaneuf was for the Calgary Flames. Coming in, he's a highly touted defenseman. People thought he's going to be this Norris guy type thing, lead this team, be a number 1 defenseman on this team. And they ended up trading him for Matt Stajan and a group of guys. So, like, it doesn't always work out how we think it's going to work out. And there's always examples on both sides of the equation, but it's always cautionary to me. Don't rush progression. You cannot rush it. It doesn't have. Matt Coronado's a good example of progression. Like, he came in here after his college season and he ended up going to the AHL. Development just happens naturally. You cannot force it. You cannot make him be a Norris champion right now. It just doesn't happen that way. So progression. Be excited, but keep your expectations tempered, because he's just not there yet.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, but I do think one day he can get there for sure.
I think so too. I think he will be up there. I think he will. I think he can get there. It's not going to be in the 25-26 season.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of priorities this offseason, like, I really think that they need to address the blue line in some regard. So, like we were talking about, whether it's making a trade for a younger guy, like, you know, you see like even a guy like Owen Power might even be on the block this summer. You know, Byram, like those are the types of players I think they should be interested in. And then maybe bringing on, you know, a free agent veteran defenseman on like a 1 or 2 year deal, and maybe you end up paying him, you know, a little more money than you'd really hope to. Like, I'm just going through the list here. For right shots, geez, man, there's not a lot available.
No, I was about to say, like,
this is an ugly group. Holy.
If you take the shot out of it, does a guy like an Ivan Provorov tickle your fancy? A Ryan Lindgren tickle your fancy? Please stay far away from Dmitry Orlov, just far, far away. Does a guy like a Brian Dumoulin, does he tickle your fancy as a stopgap guy at 33 years old, stay-at-home defensive guy? Does a Henry Yokoharu, does he make sense for you in a middle pair defensive, to help step? These free agents aren't inspiring, but I think when you're signing a UFA right now for the Flames, it's a stopgap. It's to help guys like Bristevich and Muse and those guys progress in their progression naturally so that when they get to the NHL level, they can be effective NHLers and not rushing these kids along. If you want to rush kids along, go play NHL 25. I do it. My defense is young as heck on that game. But you just, in real life, you got to have these stopgap guys, and do those guys make sense? They may not be the sexiest names. Like Brian Dumoulin doesn't come in here and inspire a ton of faith and hope in me, but would he come in here and play alongside a Mackenzie Weegar and be good enough? And that's what the Flames are looking for now, is being good enough to get to the next level, to be a stopgap guy. So you don't have to bring in Hunter Brestevich early and make him play, or play Solovyov in a top 4 role. Those guys are there, and that's, I think, how the Flames should approach free agency. To allow your guys to progress naturally and have your stopgap guys as well. Just, you got to kind of play 2 games. I know you want to be a playoff team, but you still can't rush your prospects to be the playoff team.
Yeah, I agree. So, like, ideally, I think it would be maybe they make a trade for a young defenseman, and then they sign one UFA to that kind of short-term, big money deal. Like, I'm looking here, could you bring in a Dante Fabro on a 1 or 2 year deal for big money?
Yeah, I like that one.
Blow his socks off with like, hey, like, we'll give you $4 million, $5 million for 1 year or 2 years or something like that. And then on the left side, like, do you look to bring back Joel Hanley? Like, he was a really good fit. Do you throw just, big money and short term at him? And like we've mentioned before, could he play with Parekh? So then all of a sudden you have a young defenseman like a Byram and Kevin Ball and then Hanley on the left. Or, if you bring in a guy on the left side, maybe you open up a spot in the third pair for a Solovyov or a Kuznetsov. And then on the right, you go Weegar, you trade Anderson, and, you bring in like a Fabro, and then you go like Parekh, something like that. Like, I think there needs to be multiple moves this offseason on the blue line, because, like with the strategy that Conroy has, which is try to make the playoffs while getting a little bit younger, he can't go into next season with this group if that is the official plan. Like, if his plan is to get Gavin McKenna, yeah, go in with this current defense core as constructed. But
if this plan is for McKenna, I expect no one to be back.
Exactly. But we know that's not going to happen. So, like, if he really wants to legitimately push for the playoffs, he has to pretty much drastically upgrade this group, because it's nowhere near good enough. And if you go into the season with this group, you're going to end up with, kind of like we were saying, maybe the 8th overall pick up to like 15, because that defense core is not good enough to get you to the playoffs right now. That's for sure.
No, and all due respect to those guys, right? We all love Ball. You go back over the last couple of episodes, we were talking about our letter grades. We both loved Kevin Ball's season. We gave him around the A grade. We gave Mackenzie Weegar an A grade. We love these guys back there. We're very much wondering what Kuznetsov and a Solovyov are. But if you're looking at being a playoff team, you have to go make at least 2 moves. And one of those moves, if it might be 3, if you're moving up Rasmus Anderson, you need to make 3 moves, because Rasmus Anderson is also a move. But you need to make at least 2 moves on that back end, whether that's as simple as bringing back a Joe Hanley to fill out your roster, or whether it's as bold as going out there and trying to trade for a young defenseman like a Bowen Byram, like you've mentioned, or a Keandre Miller, who very much intrigues me. Do you go out and sign a big guy in a big free agency? Like, Lindgren's going to cost you a lot and probably give you a lot of term, but is that a guy you can see bringing into this roster and helping this group? You got to have more than one move here. Really, really, it's really important for you to do that. And like I keep mentioning, it also helps your young guys, right? Because you're not trying to rush them along. You need to make these moves. I'm with you. We focus on center and for good reason, but we need to have that focus on defense as well.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe in the next episode here, we'll do some like free agent and trade targets, and we'll kind of like hone in on some more specific names. But like as a whole, they have to do something there, because that is not a good group of defensemen as currently constructed. It's the depth is certainly not there. They obviously got the high end with Weegar and the potential high end with Parekh, but for next season specifically, it's something that's got to get better for sure.
I have to ask you before we move on a little bit here. It's social media seems to be in love with the fact of Aaron Ekblad coming to Calgary because Mackenzie Weegar and him are friends. What are your thoughts on Ekblad and coming to Calgary?
No. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I appreciate what fans are trying to do. And Aaron Ekblad is a name. Absolutely is a name out there. He's a winner. He's done everything. He's the same age as Rasmus Anderson, in the exact same boat as Rasmus Anderson. He's a guy who's going to need a contract for his 30s. Do you really want to pay that and bring that into Calgary when you're trying to build for a longer term deal? I just don't see it. And all due respect to the friendship, I don't care about it.
No, I don't either. You take a look at Ekblad. He's 29 years old. He's injury riddled. I think he's kind of going to take a step back. He'll be 30 in February next season. I see him in kind of a similar situation to Rasmus Anderson in the sense of, he's going to end up getting a 7-8 year deal.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be signed into his late 30s. He's starting to slow down. He's had injury issues. That's not the kind of guy I think you want to spend, $7-8 million a year on at this point in time. I just think for where the Flames are, they would be better off to bring in a younger defenseman rather than a veteran who, in my opinion, is probably starting to take a bit of a step back, especially once he hits his 30s.
With that
good player, but like Stanley Cup champion, good player. Don't get me wrong, but just I'm thinking 3, 4, 5 years down the road when the Flames are actually ready to contend, Ekblad's going to be 33, 34 years old, and he's going to be kind of on the downswing of his career, and I just don't think that makes sense for the Flames.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I just wonder if you could take that money and find someone a little bit younger, and maybe even offer sheet a guy with big term, big money like that, just to bring him in instead. Like the Keandre Miller situation in New York is one that I'm going to be watching because I think that's a guy that could potentially be had. An offer sheet could be had there as well. And there's other players around like Bowen Byram, another name we keep mentioning on the podcast. Those are the kind of guys that you're going to want to spend that money on. Not your, all due respect, not your 30, 31-year-old defensemen that are probably on the back nine, and especially after a guy who's already maybe won twice, depending how this series versus the Oilers goes for Florida. Is he going to be motivated to come to a rebuilding middle of the pack team in Calgary and push this roster? Is he going to be motivated to get them to the next level? You always have to wonder about those kind of things. As much as they are professional athletes, that kind of stuff is always on the brain for these guys and for the fans as well.
Yeah, and I'm also a little tired of Calgary being the place where these guys get their retirement contracts.
Oh, you didn't like the Brouwer thing?
Yeah, I mean the Brouwer, the Neal, Huberdeau, these guys have gotten their retirement deals here, and not a lot of the times it doesn't end up working out for guys that age. It's been working out tremendously for Mackenzie Weegar so far, and he's almost a bit of an exception to the rule. But for a guy like Ekblad who's just going to look to cash in, he's won his cups, he's had his success. That's not a guy I want to spend a ton of money on.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Do we need to talk about goaltending?
I think the only interesting thing with the goaltending right now is that there's a lot of rumors out there that the Flames are favorites to land a Russian goaltender named Ivan Prisvetov. Yeah, he's played in the KHL the last season. He's an Arizona Coyotes draft pick. He's played 24 NHL games, most recently for Colorado in the 23-24 season, and
he's not good.
You take a look at his numbers in North America, it looks like he's really struggled, but in the KHL this year, he looks like he absolutely lit it up. So, he's massive. He's 6'5". So, yeah, if the Flames end up landing him, then all of a sudden you got Wolf, you got Cooley, you got Prisvetov, you got Owen Say, who they just signed as a free agent in the NCAA. You got Sergeyev. Who you're hoping maybe plays in the American Hockey League next year. Then there's Vladar. All of a sudden, it kind of starts to get crowded if they end up signing this Russian goalie.
If they sign him, that's so redundant to me. It really, really is. All the respect to him and the season he had in the KHL, good for him. He's not very good in North America. Go look at his numbers. They are not inspiring, and he played in Colorado, and they were not inspiring there. For me, this is why not just, if you're going to go out and do this move, why not just re-sign Dan Vladar? Because that's what this move looks like to me. Why not just re-sign Dan Vladar? And I know Dan Vladar is going to want to try to test the market, see what else is out there and want more. But that's why you have Devin Cooley here as well. So if you're going out and signing another guy, I don't understand what you're trying to do here, because if he doesn't make the NHL roster, now you're gumming up the AHL where you have a few guys that you really want to take a look at, Sergeyev, Ignatieff, and so on and so forth. Where does it end for you here and for the Flames? So it's an interesting name. It's an interesting move for me. But for me, it's just, we talked about it on the last couple podcasts as well, about players blocking other players if they're coming back to Calgary. I think this would block other players. This would block your other goaltenders from their progression. It doesn't make sense for me. And if you're going to do it, why not just resign Vladar?
Yeah, I think the way I read it is, if they end up signing Prisvetov, I think Vladar is gone. There's no way he's coming back. There's just too many goalies in the system. Mm-hmm. So, say they do sign Prisvetov, I see him as the American Hockey League goalie, and then they're going with a Wolf Cooley tandem next year. I would be shocked if it went any other way than that.
Sure, I can see that too, but I still would rather it be Sergeyev and Day and Ignatiev fighting for those minutes in the HL rather than some middle, like 26, 27 goaltender for Russia.
26.
Like why not just go, like, I understand you want to have succession plans, you want to have insurance policies and all that kind of good stuff, but does he really provide you more than what you already have here? And if it's going to be Devin Cooley with Dustin Wolf, then roll that way. And then let your younger prospects play in the AHL. So this is the one move that I'm going to question a little bit from Conroy if he does make it. And maybe I'm proven wrong today. Maybe this guy comes in here and he's a really good tandem with Dustin Wolf at the end of the day and he takes off and has this incredible NHL career. I'll eat my words, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's fair. And the one thing to keep in mind, though, is I believe Ignatiev is going back to Sweden.
Oh, is he? I did not see that.
So he won't be with the Flames next year, the organization. So they... once again, hypothetically, they sign Prisvetov, and they'll have 5 guys, and then, like an Owen Say will go to the ECHL, and then you'll probably have Prisvetov and Sergeyev with the Wranglers, and then Wolf and Cooley up with the Flames. And in terms of Wolf and Cooley, I'm okay with that. I know we've gone ad nauseum on Devin Cooley on this podcast. This is the Devin Cooley fan podcast here, but I think we both think that there's upside there. Coming into next season, after a full season of training, he'll come in 100% healthy. I think he'll be over his injury issues from last year. Like my understanding is that in the second half of the season, he was not playing anywhere close to 100%.
That concussion really did a number on him.
Totally. Yeah. So he had the concussion, then he didn't end up playing in the playoffs. I think that really, really set him back last year. So if he can come in at 100% and play like he did at the first half of the AHL season, I think him and Wolf could be a very solid tandem. I hear a lot of stuff like Wolf needs that veteran experience behind him. I'm like, I don't really know if he does.
He showed he doesn't now. I think really at the end of that season when they gave him the ropes at last 12-ish games, he didn't need any veteran telling him anything.
Exactly. And and Dan Vladar, I mean, he's played in the league as a backup for 3 or 4 years. It's not like he's a Jake Allen kind of guy who's seen and done everything in the league. I don't understand that argument. I don't understand why a Cooley and Wolf combo couldn't work. And like we said, if Cooley doesn't work out, then put him on waivers and you go out and find another Dan Vladar typical. I don't really think it's a big deal. So.
And people are kidding themselves to think Dan Vladar's this old grizzled vet. Go look at the games played. He played a ton in the American Hockey League with Providence Bruins before he came to Calgary. It's not like they got out and they got like a Curtis Joseph behind Kiprasov type thing. That's not what we have here. It's a very respectable player in Dan Vladar, a guy who's a career backup, who's just fine in that role, helping a young kid. And that's exactly what they were. That's exactly what Devin Cooley would be, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I like the upside on Cooley. I like the personality. I think him and Wolf would probably get along really well. Mm-hmm. He seems like a really great guy, great team guy. So yeah,
Californian guys
for sure. Yeah, and that's honestly something to even consider. So, there's some connection there between those two. So I like that idea. We'll see how that all plays out. The Prisvetov thing kind of came out of nowhere, and maybe he could be a good AHL goalie. Who knows? But yeah. If they end up signing him, it's pretty clear to me that Vladar will move on and they'll have Wolf and Cooley for next year, which, once again, I would not be opposed to whatsoever.
Okay, so I'm on the podcast planning real quick. Do we want to get into offer sheets now, or do we want to save that for next week?
Yeah, let me do that next week. We'll dive into maybe some more free agent, trade targets, offer sheet targets, and maybe get a little more specific with that.
All right, listeners, you heard from Robert next week's episode already, so tune in for that one. As far as the end of this one, Robert, what's coming up from you on flamesnation.ca? Where can the folks find you and your work?
Well, here, to finish up this episode, why don't we just kind of quickly kind of run down, what do you think Craig Conroy's priority list is? Like, we don't need to go into depth or anything, but like, if you're in Craig Conroy's chair, what are the number one priorities for this offseason for you?
Nail the draft and figure out Rasmus Anderson.
That's it.
So those are my lists. And then you hit free agency stuff. Yeah,
I agree. I keep hearing this kind of, is a bit of a sidebar conversation, but like I keep hearing people say, like, how the Flames knocked the 2024 draft out of the park and how they really prioritize skill and upside and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, why don't they do that every draft?
Yeah, well, that's good. We did it last year. Let's do it again. That's my answer. Is like, okay, that's one draft out of one for Craig Conroy. Next, let's do it again.
Like, I really hope, like, because like you look at the 2023 draft with Honzig and Suniev and Morin, I don't really think a lot of those guys were like really high upside picks. They were more like kind of safe. These guys are like decent 200-foot players and they're all pretty big and all that kind of stuff. But like the 24 draft was like, we're taking swings for the fences here. We're trying to hit grand slams with upside. I'm like, I really hope they do that again this year. I really hope so.
Yeah, as much as I want to see a draft of all centers, like I did a mock on Future Connections Hockey. Like they have this, you can do your own mock draft, and I did an entire mock draft where I took nothing but 7 centers. Like you can do fun things like that there. I really hope Craig Conroy is dialed in on best available and always bet on skill. 100%.
And I think for me, off-season priorities, I think it's so obviously you got to figure out the RFA contracts, but I think they're pretty straightforward for the most part.
Me too.
See if you can sign Dustin Wolf, see if you can get him signed to like an 8-year deal. I think that would be super important. Figure out the Rasmus Anderson situation. Maybe we can talk about that more next week because we didn't really dive into him too much. But I mean, that's, people have been talking about Rasmus Anderson for like 2 months now. And then just I think they need to figure out the defense. Like we dove into there. I think that's a huge priority for Craig Conroy. And then I really think they got to make like some swing or like take a big chance on a trade and try to bring in some upside. Whether that's on the blue line with the Bowen Byram's, Owen Powers of the world, whether it's up front with Marco Rossi, JJ Peterka, Elias Pettersson type of deal. I would like to see the Flames take a swing at some upside at a younger guy with lots of skill, lots of potential that can really be part of the next core group of this team. I think that should also be a priority for Conroy because they have a lot of assets to work with. They have a lot of prospects. They have a lot of picks. They have a log jam at forward. They got Rasmus Anderson as a trade chip. Like there's a lot of assets for Craig Conroy to play with this year, and I'd like to see him take advantage of it and maybe bring in a young guy, not a 25 or 26-year-old. I'm talking like a 20 to 22, 23-year-old that can be part of the next core of the team. So those are kind of my off-season priorities.
Man, I'd like to see Marco Rossi in a Flames uniform. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Something like that as well for the Flames. Like, obviously, I think those RFA contracts we're talking about, they're all pretty easily done. I think you have an entire year to get a Dustin Wolf extension in place. So I think that's going to happen. And so really that's why I put the priority as the draft. You focus on your draft and nailing your draft. You focus on a Rasmus Anderson trade or extension, and then you know what to do then on your back end for your defense. Hey, we no longer have Rasmus. We need to find something to fit that hole. And we need to find something to fit the hole where Joe Hanley was last year. So I think you and I are pretty in lockstep here that it's a pretty important offseason for Craig Conroy. He's got a couple of really big things in front of him to take care of, but they're all very doable. You just got to go out there and you just got to get them done. He's got to be smart about it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how he maneuvers the next couple of months here.
The big thing for me is like he can't do nothing. Because if you go into next year with the exact same team for the most part, like, the Rasmus Anderson situation hasn't been handled, you're just going to end up just outside the playoffs again. The way the team is currently constructed, they are built to finish just outside the playoffs by
I think they'll be worse.
Spots.
I think you're going to take a step back. You come back with the same roster, you're taking a step back. And it's as much as we like Nazem Kadri, we like Michael Backlund, we like Mackenzie Beeger, someone's bound to take a step back. Father Time's bound to find someone eventually, and it could be next year. So you come back to the same group, you're just tempting fate here. And are you going to get those bounces at the end of the season? Are you going to get those wins that you need? Are you going to have a team stumble to let you get into the playoff mix? Like, is Vancouver going to be as poor as they are this year, next year? Like, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So you come back with the same group, you're just tempting fate. You want to progress your roster, and so this is a big offseason to do so. You have the pieces, you have the ability to do it, you have a big draft in front of you. Go do it, make it happen. And like I said earlier in the podcast, bold teams find ways to get it done, and they end up getting paid off at the end of the day with Stanley Cups or long playoff runs.
The thing I worry about, though, is I agree. Like, I could see some guys taking a step back, but I could also see a bunch of guys taking a step forward, too. Like, sure. I could see, if Farabee stays on the team, I could see Farabee putting up, an extra 20, 30-point pace compared to what he was before. I could see Frost taking a step, Zary taking a step, Coronado pushes 30, Sharon Govich gets back to normal. Could Klapka step up and score 10, 12 goals this year on the fourth line? Like those are the kind of guys I could see stepping up. Well, maybe Kadri as he gets a little bit older, and Coleman, Backlund, Huberdeau, as they all get a little bit older, they take a little bit of a step back. But I see some of the other guys taking a step forward, and maybe that just kind of keeps them right in that sort of 9th, 10th, 11th spot in the Western Conference next year. That's
just where we like it,
and that's where they're headed, and that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah,
like if you're Conroy, I think we talked about a lot. Like, either be bad on purpose and try to tank and get high draft picks, or push for the playoffs. And with the way the roster is currently constructed, I see them right in between those two things. So that's why I'm saying, like, this is a good offseason for Craig Conroy to push and make a couple splashes and go for upside on younger players. And maybe those guys can push you into the playoffs, not only next year, but down the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% with you. Robert, this has been a wicked chat this week. I've really liked this kind of stuff. We're going to continue it next week. We'll talk more offer sheets, more targets of players. We'll get into Rasmus Sanderson. In the meantime, though, as I mentioned before, let these folks know where they can find you and your work. What's coming up on Flames Nation from you?
Yeah. Find me at Ring of Fire CGY. Just trying to put out some fun Flames content. And then, just doing some like report card articles, and then I'll probably end up doing some trade targets and offer sheet stuff at flamesnation.ca as well. Keep a lookout for that.
And if you haven't seen or heard our letter grade episodes, we did it in 3 parts, broke up the roster, went deep dive on each of these players. Go back on the Red Mile Rundown wherever you get your podcasts. Check out those episodes and let us know what you think of them as well. We appreciate those who take the time in the spring when there's not Flames hockey to keep listening to our podcasts and our thoughts on the Calgary Flames. We appreciate your love and support across social media as well. Don't forget to follow me at VintageJohnny84 across those social media platforms, and give us those 5-star ratings and reviews wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy the Stanley Cup final as it kicks off on Wednesday. Anyone but Edmonton, please. That's how I look at it at the end of the day. We'll see you guys next week here on the Red Mile Rundown.